This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft, because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Robert, Kathryn, and I are talking about Act 1, and this will be one of our library episodes, so make sure you go to the show notes at storyworkspodcast.com. We will have all of the related episodes at the bottom of the page in a handy slider, so you can preview them and check out more content. All right, Act 1, Page 1, first word. What do we need it to do?
Well, you want them to keep reading. So I suppose it's got to have some meaning for the story that's then going to be relevant to the climax. So there's a fair bit of responsibility in that opening portion. Mm-hmm. However you define that.
Yes, there is. And it really has to convey to the reader what the story is about. My coaching group, we were just talking about this last week, that your opening scene has to let the reader know, I'm in for a story about relationships. I'm in for a story with high emotional stakes. I'm in for a story with magic realism or a fantasy or something. And so, your first words, first sentence, first paragraph are going to get us into the narrative voice, and we'll discover the point of view in those opening lines. But by the time we get through 2 pages or so, we should know what kind of ride we're in for. And if we don't, if a reader can't say, to a friend, oh, I just started this book, it's about blank. It's about fill in the blank. If the reader's like, I'm not sure what I'm about, what this book is about, where it's going, then your opening isn't making the necessary connections. Yes.
I'm curious so we talk about Act 1 as if everybody knows about it. Presumably we're talking about a standard 3-act structure. So we've got Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. What is the purpose of Act 1 anyway?
Good question. Act 1 is about introductions and setup. So we are meeting our protagonist, entering the world of the story. So being introduced to our protagonist, our key players, the world, what that consists of. And we are learning who this person is, where and when this person is as well, what sort of situation, life circumstances this person is in before the inciting incident that turns our character's life upside down. So Act 1 is establishing who we're going on a journey with and what that character's place in the world is before that journey is launched. And so the setup piece of Act 1 is setting us up for the journey that is about to begin. So it's showing us what is at stake. If our character needs to go on a journey, a physical adventure, what is the character leaving behind? Is it easy to walk away from, or is it heartrending to leave this place? What are the character's abilities or, frame of reference, worldview? So if we meet a character who is a shepherd, we're going to understand that this character knows about being outdoors all the time, maybe lives in a mountainous region, is used to being alone, can handle himself, in the wilderness, has those types of skills because might have to sleep on a hillside with a flock of sheep sometimes and such. So that's going to impart to us a sense of both who this character is, qualities and traits, but also skills, abilities, specialized knowledge, and activities that then become useful in some way. So whatever else remains to be learned or gained on the journey, what is already established in Act One is meaningful. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's quite an involved description of, a flow through of some of the things that are going to have to be in there. And we might be talking about a substantial part of the novel, if we're talking fiction, obviously, that the inciting incident isn't even necessarily occurring yet. So you're juggling this. Well, I want the reader to keep reading, but the big inciting incident that propels them into an irreversible journey, whatever the mental, emotional, physical journey is, hasn't yet happened. And so I think this is one of the difficulties in writing a really good Act One, is that it's got to be almost a mini story in itself, in that something has to propel the action in Act One, or else a reader won't continue. So we might call that a hook or whatever, that's going to open the first few pages. But within that, you've got to establish the characters, the setting. You've got to set the scene, flag what type of book it is, what type of story they might be getting, and so no wonder it can feel like it can go off the rails quickly. And sometimes when we're doing book submissions and reading book submissions, a lot of authors seem to confuse what they open their book with the inciting incident, and don't understand that the main character's inciting incident is going to be when there's no turning back. And so something dramatic may happen right at the start, and we might be in media res, but that isn't the inciting incident, or generally
exactly.
No, it isn't. It doesn't mean to say
inciting incident.
Yeah. Right. That's that feeling of something is coming and then the inciting incident happens, right? You want to have that they're doing something toward inciting incident, and then they have to make that choice, right? And so I think it's really hard for me when the Act One feels very disconnected from Act Two. You don't understand how the character ended up in Act Two. So you got to remember that Act One is still part of that overall story, right? So it's your hook needs to lead to the inciting incident. Your character needs to be on the trajectory that makes sense for them to get into the inciting incident. So it's not just, we woke up and went to ballet today. If something big is going to happen involving, a family tragedy or something that propels them into the story, there needs to be family conflict right from the beginning that then propels you towards the family tragedy being the inciting incident or whatever happens with that. You can't just have drudgery. It needs to feel like, okay, I understand we're on the path. We're on the path to the inciting incident. And I think this is where sometimes you can just cut the first couple chapters you write because you're getting your own self in. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I see. This is the path to where my character needs to go.
Right. And, I want writers to be careful of words like action, because we say the word action, you think action, but action just means, in this context, forward momentum in the story. We want to bring the reader through the doors. So think of opening the cover of a book like opening the door. And I've got an example. I think it's in the Point of View book. You open that door, and let's say there is a woman standing at the base of a staircase, and there's a young man, maybe 17 or 18 years old, standing up on, no, let's reverse that. The woman's up on the staircase, the young man is on the landing, and you open the door, right? So what kind of story is this? Well, let's say it's upper class America, and the woman is the mother and the man is a teenage son, and the mother has a martini in her hand and she's scolding her son, and her son is angry, and he turns and he storms out the door. Oh, I just learned a lot about what kind of story I'm entering. But let's say I open that door, the book cover, and it's 19th century Western America, and it's a saloon, and the woman is one of the saloon girls, and she's looking down at her young cowboy lover who's about to go out on the range with the cows for 3 months. And she's looking at him longingly and heartbroken. And without him and without the promise of marriage, she's stuck in this life of being a saloon girl. Oh, that's a totally different story. And I know which door I want to go through in a page, right? So the opening action doesn't have to be big or complex. It just has to move the reader to say, yes, I'm walking through this door.
Yeah. I like to think of it as the director, lights, camera, action. So, once that camera's rolling, something's got to be happening in front of it. But it might just be a person staring off into the distance. Hopefully not for very long, but it's when we say action, because we often do use, or I often use examples of the shoot 'em up variety. But yeah, you're quite right. We're talking about momentum and narrative drive as being the action on that's what is unfolding on the page, and so what is unfolding on the page in Act 1 has to inevitably lead to an inciting incident. Even if we can't see it coming, it still has to make sense. Even if it comes out of the blue, it still has to make sense that that's going to propel that character into an unknown that they are now going to have to deal with as part of the story.
Well, and you're presenting the character that would logically make the choice that you need them to make in the inciting incident too. So you have to craft that in a way that gives your reader that, okay, I believe that this character would make that choice when they get there. So you can't just present random bits of their character. You need to focus it on who is this person and why are they going to make this jump.
Are you ready to take your storycraft to the next level? StoryWorks Fiction Online School has courses available right now, from micro courses on character traits to master level workshops on plot and building characters. There are also live workshops with your instructor in the classroom with you every week, guiding your progress and workshopping your manuscripts along the way. Check out storyworksfiction.com today and take your storycraft to the next level. Right. Yes, it has to be. So when we get to the inciting incident at the end of Act 1, it is immediately followed by the character's choice, by the character's agency saying, yes, I proceed into Act 2, or no, I go off somewhere else. And of course, the character has to go off into Act 2. So logically, there's really only one choice, but we need the character to have agency. And that choice is the one that launches the journey. There's no going home from that choice. So if we take our saloon girl and cowboy, let's say the saloon girl is the point of view character and her cowboy goes off, and a few weeks later, she gets word that he might have been lost in a blizzard or fallen down a ravine or something. And she's hoping he comes back, but she's heartbroken. And along comes, the widowed dentist across the street who, after he pulls out one of her teeth, asks her to marry him. Does she keep waiting and hoping for final word about her cowboy, or does she marry him? How desperate is she? What is the life like in the saloon? How much did she love the cowboy? And so she might make the choice we don't want her to make because we want her to wait for the cowboy, but it's the choice she has to make to go into Act 2, and we have to say yes to that choice. We want you to wait for the cowboy, but you can't stay at that saloon. Yes, you'll marry him.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really difficult balance though, isn't it? Because you've got, when it's done badly, it's the it's the group of youngsters walking into the abandoned house and the cellar doorway and saying, no, we don't go down there. And then they all go down there. Yeah, all right, here we go. So like every horror story out there. Don't go into the woods. Hey, where are you going? Oh, into the woods. So that delicate thing of making it believable, I think, is one of the great things you can do with Act One, is that when it comes to the point where they're faced with that agency choice, you know what they need, but they can't get it. So they have to do something else, and it has to make sense.
Well, and this is such a fun example to play with, because then you can reverse engineer that, right? So you say, okay, so what did we need to show in Act One that you understand her making this choice? Okay, we show the dentist and he's a nice guy. He's not going to mistreat her. And we show the saloon and it's horrible and we don't want her to stay there. And we show the storm and it was bad and we don't know if he'd survive that, right? Ooh, man, this is a lot of stuff, right? So then you've got all of these things that can happen in Act One and you don't have to feel quite so lost. Oh, great. what am I supposed to write here? It's like, oh, okay, hold on. I need the dentist. I need her, love, but also maybe just desperation. And also the saloon being awful. And also this, and then you don't have to worry so much about, am I in the right direction? It's okay. Just here I am setting this up.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And when we do that, the story creates its own momentum because the choices become so apparent. They might not be easy choices for the character to make. They might not be the ideal choices the character wants to make. But given all of the story elements that we have created and that the reader has therefore understood and invested in, our character must walk through that door. And then we've done our work in Act One, right? We've introduced the character, we've introduced the stakes, we've introduced the supporting characters, the setting, and we have set up the choice she needs to make. And therefore, what kind of repercussions are going to start unfolding in Act Two? And what other kinds of events can come forth? The cowboy returns wounded but alive, the whatever, the dentist passes away but she's already pregnant by him, and now does the cowboy take her? You laugh, but I'm telling you.
No, but that's where the fun comes in, right? And I think for me, I always struggle with Act One with that idea of, wait, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to say here? I know where I'm going, but I don't backtrack well enough. So I liked that example because you gave us such a strong inciting incident. So I was able to think backwards, because for me, for me, I can always kind of, and then my way through brainstorming for Act Two. But Act One always kind of feels a little bit more like, wait, hold on. What did I need and how do I get there? And so being able to hit that inciting incident and have your hook and say, okay, now let's reverse engineer our way backwards, gave me a really strong pull from hook to inciting incident without really having to worry too much about, wait, what do I say? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I love that you said that, because I think a lot of writers start thinking about their story and they're like, well, wait, I want my reader to know this. I want this in here. I need to figure out and establish all this stuff. But really, you can pull in too much extraneous material that would be better left to unfold later. And what you need is the elements that are going to make that choice the inevitable choice, the best choice that the reader says yes to. So do we need to know about the railroad company that's coming into town in Act One? Probably not. Who cares? What we need to know is what her life is like and what influences would compel her to say yes to that proposal.
Right. Because some of the language that gets bandied around the hero's journey makes this difficult, I think, especially for novice writers, because we'll often talk about the ordinary world before they cross the threshold, go into the extraordinary world. And it's not ordinary. There's nothing ordinary about it. It's a story world that you're inviting the reader into. So like you said, Alida, you're opening the door to something, the cameras are rolling and there's action. So, it's not just ordinary world and say, she lived in a suburban house and, went to work every day. Yeah, okay, but what are the emotional issues they're dealing with and how do they relate to what that choice is going to be, what choice is going to be presented at the end of Act 1? I really like what Kathryn said about working backwards, because I think that actually happened to me in a work in progress where I had a very dramatic moment, and it wasn't until I'd gone back over the outline I had many times trying to understand why I was having so much problem with it and why Act 1 seemed to have lots of action in it, but it just didn't feel like it was right, was because I pushed the inciting incident way too far into the book. So I just cut a whole load of stuff and it came at the perfect point and it made total sense as to why it drives the story and brought in many different elements of conflict into the one thing. So then I knew what I was working toward with that inciting incident, because that was already well fleshed out. So, okay, now I know how to get there. So it's precisely what you're saying, Kathryn. I think it's a really, really good tip to think about that. If you're struggling with Act 1 is what's my map to get there that makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then the choice of agency as well, which I think is always difficult because, as you say, what they should choose, but they can't choose it. So I think writing that in a way that makes sense to the reader that's the skill of authorship. I like the I like the idea of having dilemmas. I like the idea of having the best bad choice. So whichever choice it is comes with consequences. So there's that, or there's the irreconcilable good choices where you can have this and it's fantastic, or you can have this and it's fantastic, but you can't have both. And so I think if you can put your character in that sort of situation, and those things may happen all the way through Act 1 anyway, until you get to the big one where there's just no turning back.
Right. Well, Act 1 is so short, such a small piece of the entire novel that while you don't want to have a character without agency in Act 1, you don't want to have somebody who seems to be passively bandied about by stuff happening to her. The moment of true agency is really at that inciting incident, and often it looks like a no-brainer. The choice can be invisible. If we think about Star Wars and The Wizard of Oz, is Luke Skywalker not going to go back to Obi-Wan Kenobi and learn to be a Jedi Knight?
True.
Like, he's a young, red-blooded, hot teenager. Of course he wants adventure. He's not going to rebuild the dust farm that his aunt and uncle left him. Oh, boring, right? And hard. He's going to go sign up with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Dorothy has these ruby slippers on her feet and she wants to go home. They're like, just follow the yellow brick road. Well, am I going to sit here sucking on a lollipop and singing with the guild, or am I going to follow the yellow brick road? So it's a no-brainer, which makes the choice invisible to us as readers. But ultimately, we need the character to take that step of his or her own free will.
Yeah, I mean, when in Luke Skywalker's case, you want him to take that choice. And in a way, it is a best bad choice, because to remain there is to live with grief, to have to rebuild, to not have the life of excitement that he craved. But then the life of excitement he craved is actually not quite what he was what he was up for. You go, oh, you mean when I want to go on an adventure, it's this? Okay, then, and take a deep breath and go for it. So yeah, I think it's a really good illustration of surprising but inevitable. It's inevitable that he's going to have to go on that journey, but we don't know how that's going to happen. So yeah, like I say, I think it's a real art form to get